Welcome to 5 Minute Book Reviews, Episode 4. Today I'm going to be reviewing Boy in the Striped Pajamas, a book by John Boyle, published by David Fickling Books, which is an imprint of Random House Books in 2006, about 216 pages, the copy that I had. My copy also included a brief author's note at the end, an 8-question reader's guide, and also an interview where the author really didn't add altogether to that much to the story itself. First page of my book says this is a fable. I am almost at a loss for that because I don't think that this book can really be qualified as a fable. Maybe in some sense, but fables, it seems to me, usually have things like trees or animals or hurricanes, things that talk or have other human characteristics. I can't even remember if there was an animal in this book, to be honest with you. I don't think there was. Maybe there was, but there's none of that. There's no animals or anything in this book that talk, unless somehow we've converted the animals into people, and never mind. So it might be some kind of a parable, but if it is a parable, what's the overarching point the author's trying to make? So I quote then from the very end of the book. Spoiler. And that's the end of the story about Bruno and his family. Of course, all of this happened a long time ago, and nothing like that could ever happen again, not in this day and age. Well, see, that's all fine and good. Perhaps it's a little bit absurd, if that's the point he's trying to make, because of course things like that have happened in our day and age. If we were talking about the Holocaust, obviously we've seen other sorts of those things, maybe not to that extent, but nonetheless we have seen them. So my point is that there's really no great revelation here. I feel like maybe there's just a little bit of a preachy tone to that kind of statement by the author, but what do I know? On the other hand, if he's talking about that happening, that is a naive little boy going to a fence every day and talking to another little boy, and then somehow ending up on the other side of that fence and being led to the slaughter, however innocently, well, we've seen that story before too. Stories like The Prince and the Pauper, Trading Places with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy, or maybe even The Man in the Iron Mask by Alexander Dumas. Except that with this story, The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, there's just a little bit of a darker ending that is perhaps meant to teach us a different, kind of lesson. I don't really know. So here's my take. First, I think it's very important to remember that this book is fiction. And if you read this as anything other than fiction, you're going to be disappointed. I think of this book kind of like the way I think about Inglourious Basterds, the film by Quentin Tarantino. It's a fictional, it's imaginative, it's an alternative history about the Second World War and the Holocaust. I don't really think there's any other way to read this book. We cannot take seriously the friendship at the fence. We cannot take seriously the outcome of that friendship. We cannot take seriously Bruno being given a costume. At least that's how he viewed it. Everything is entirely too coincidental. Living next door to it, having the same birthday, having a shaved head. I don't even think I can take seriously Adolf Hitler and his girlfriend, Eva Braun, coming to dinner at the house of a low-level German officer. I can't take seriously any of that. Even if I'm meant to read the book seriously and decipher the author's true intention, none of that, I think, can be taken seriously. So what I think we can take seriously away from this book, how is friendship. And if that's the point of the story, well, then I say good. Perhaps looking through the eyes of a child at the world that we adults have created is the kind of tonic that we need for miserable times, or it's a means of correcting a listing ship. Bruno is naive, and this leads him into all sorts of conversations and friendships in the book with people that the adults would not be friends with or have conversations with. And every single time Bruno does this, he tends to kind of peer inside of people and see them for exactly what they are. He's still hopelessly naive. I think there's a fairly good consensus on this, but he simply does what he wants to do, and the authorities be damned. I mean, he's going to do what he wants to do all the time, on every page. And that's what I love about the book. I've read enough history about those times to know that this book is, to some extent, laughably historically inaccurate in a very narrow, personal, human being sense. But if you set it within a larger context, sure, there were concentration camps, there was Auschwitz, there was Hitler, there were real human beings suffering under that authority. But I think in another way, it also reminds us that not every German who lived during those days was like that authority or approved of it. Now, other stories like Schindler's List or Number of the Stars or The Book Thief, they also demonstrate the same thing, but in a more deliberate way. So back to my point, I love that through Bruno, we can see that even though his act of defiance was pathetically naive, there were reminded of others whose acts of defiance were quite deliberate. It seems to me that friendship is friendship in the world, whether that friendship is born out of a naivete or out of a deliberateness. I'd rather have a deliberate friendship. And I think that what the world needs is we ought not to be like Bruno in that sense. In other words, we ought not to be out formulating friendships based on rather naive blindness. I don't think we can afford to be naive about friendships. I think we have to be deliberate about friendships. But I suppose at the end of the day, a friendship is a friendship, and however we make that friendship is going to be worth it. I gave the book 4 out of 5 stars, but only because it's not trying to be history. I don't think the author really was trying to give us history here. I think it's trying to make a point within the confines of history, and authors are sometimes want to do such things. Check out my blog, check out my Goodreads, and subscribe to 5-Minute Book Reviews. Next time, we'll be reviewing this book, The Lost City of the Monkey God by Douglas Preston. Stay tuned. See you next time. Bye.